And we're continuing with this, the 62nd chapter of David Copperfield, with the article about Micawber from the Port Middlebury Times. The public dinner to our distinguished fellow colonist and townsperson Wilson. I should do this in an Australian accent. The public dinner to our distinguished fellow colonist and townsperson Wilson Micawber, Esquire, Port Middlebury, District Magistrate, came off yesterday in the large room of the hotel, which was crowded to suffocation. It is estimated that not fewer than 47 persons must have accommodated with dinner at one time, exclusive to the company of the passage, in the passage, and on the stairs. The beauty, fashion, and exclusiveness of Port Middlebay flocked to do honour to one so deservedly esteemed, so highly talented, and so wildly popular. Dr. Mell, of Colonial Salem House Grammar School, Port Middlebay, presided, and on his right sat the distinguished guest. After the removal of the cloth and the singing of Non Nobis, beautifully executed, and in which we were at no loss to distinguish the bell-like notes of that gifted amateur, Wilkins Micawber, Esquire, Jr., the usual loyal and patriotic toasts were severely given and rapturously received. Dr. Mell, in a speech replete with feeling, then proposed our distinguished guest the ornament of our town. May he never leave us but to better himself, and may his success among us be such as to render his bettering himself impossible. The cheering with which the toast was received defies description. Again and again it rose and fell like the waves of ocean. At length all was hushed, and Wilkins Micawber, Esquire, presented himself to return thanks. Far be it from us, in the present comparatively imperfect state of the resources of our establishment, to endeavour to follow our distinguished townsperson through the smoothly flowing periods of his polished and highly ornated dress. Suffice to observe that it was a masterpiece of eloquence, and that those passages in which he most particularly traced his own successful career to its source, and warned the younger portion of his auditory form in the shoals of ever-incurring pecuniary liabilities, which they were unable to liquidate, brought a tear to the manliest eye present. The remaining toasts were Dr. Mell, Mrs. Micawber, who gracefully bowed her acknowledgments from the side door, where a galaxy of beauty was elevated on chairs at once to witness and adorn the gratifying scene, Mrs. Ridger Beggs, the late Miss Micawber, Mrs. Mell, Wilkins Micawber, Esquire, Jr., who convulsed the assembly by humorously remarking that he found himself unable to return thanks in a speech, but would do so with their permission in a song. Mrs. Micawber's family, well known, it is needless to remark, in the mother country, etc., etc., etc. At the conclusion of the proceedings, the tables were cleared as if by art magic for dancing. Among the votaries of Terpsichore, who disported themselves until Saul gave warning for departure, Wilkins Micawber, Esquire, Jr., and the lovely and accomplished Miss Helena, fourth daughter of Dr. Mell, were particularly remarkable. I was looking back at the name of Dr. Mell, pleased to have discovered in these happier circumstances Mr. Mell, formerly four-pince usher of my Middlesex magistrate, when I found on glancing at the remaining contents of the newspaper that Mr. Micawber was a diligent and esteemed correspondent of that journal. There was a letter from him in that same paper touching a bridge. There was an advertisement of a collection of similar letters by him, to be shortly republished in a neat volume, with considerable additions, and unless I am very much mistaken, the leading article was his also. We talked much of Mr. Micawber on many other evenings while Mr. Peggotty remained with us. He lived with us during the whole term of his stay, which I think was something less than a month, and his sister and my aunt came to London to see him. Agnes and I parted from him aboard ship when he sailed, and we shall never part from him more on earth. But before he left, he went with me to Yarmouth to see a little tablet I had put up in the churchyard in memory of Ham. While I was copying the plain inscription for him, I saw him stoop and gather a tuft of grass from the grave, and a little earth. "For Emily," he said, as he put it in his breast. "I promised, Master Davy." And that is the end of chapter 62.